win this battle. It's our intellect, and don't fall for what the other side has done to win at any cost. That's not the way we are. That's not the fabric this nation was cut out of. So our next guest is going to help refine our argument. Share that information that you need to hear and put it to work. Our next guest is author Dan Wos.
That was very nice. Thank you, Dave. My name is Dan Wos. I wrote a book called Good Gun, Bad Guy because I got tired of watching the media manipulate the narrative, and I got tired of seeing people fall for the lies that come from the anti-gun radicals. As Dave was saying, I was on the other side. I like to say I used to hang with the wrong crowd, and it wasn't drug dealers, it wasn't people robbing banks, it was liberal anti-gunners. But I was raised in a pro-gun family. So when I was a kid, I shot guns with my dad. He taught me how to shoot them, taught me how to clean them, taught me how to hunt. And I did all that stuff. And I knew guns from the time I was a kid. But it was when I got into my 20s, and like I said, starting to hang out with the wrong crowd, I started to get caught up in all the anti-gun propaganda too. And they say you are who you surround yourself with, and that's a true thing. Because when you're in an environment, you tend to take on the thought process of that environment. And so it's difficult for some people to get out of it because they actually do get convinced and brainwashed into that stuff. So, and I see you nod your head because it's true. We see it all the time. We have relatives, we have friends, we have people that we know that are not necessarily bad people, but they're caught up in this fake gun narrative. So, I started to see the truth. I started to understand how important guns are in our lives because I have a wife and I have a son. And the first and foremost thing my responsibility is to protect my family. As a man, as a husband, as a father, it's my job to take care of my family. Well, there was one night that I didn't think I was able to do it. My wife and I had a situation, and I talk about the story in my book. It wasn't really a dramatic thing, but it was just enough to show me that I may have not been able to protect myself and my wife. So in that moment, I had one of those moments of clarity. And I hope everybody can have one of those at some point in their life because it's pretty profound. I just hope that you're not in danger when it happens. And what I decided was that it's time to get a gun. And I knew in that moment that guns aren't bad, guns are good. Because guns save lives, guns protect families. And thank you. So I had one of those moments of clarity, an aha moment. That's what changed everything for me. And people say, well, how did it happen? Did it happen over time? Did it happen overnight? And it kind of did happen overnight. So for me, what I did after that point is, training, retraining, and learning about all the things about concealed carry, all the new handguns, all the different options, holsters, safes, the whole thing. And I brought my wife through the entire process so she could see, because she came from a kind of a non-gun family. She didn't really take a view on it either way. So now I understand the importance of firearms and how they relate to our rights, our liberties, and our safety. So my research started to uncover a lot of stuff. A lot of the narrative that happens on the anti-gun side, a lot of the propaganda that we see on channels like, the mainstream media, and how they like to manipulate the conversation, manipulate the narrative. So I'm going to give you an example. Have you ever heard someone say, well, I support your Second Amendment right, but I think we need common sense gun restrictions? We've heard this. Well, you can't do both. You can't support my right to keep and bear arms while restricting my right to keep and bear arms. But people in this country are being trained and conditioned to think, to mix up and confuse the definitions of rights and privileges. A privilege is something that's man-made. It's given and it can be taken away. A privilege is something you use as leverage on people. You can use it on leverage on people. You know, you'll have your kid. He doesn't finish his dinner. He loses the privilege of staying up past 9 o'clock. That's a privilege. A right cannot be taken away. A right is inherent. A right is part of being human. It's inherent, it's God-given, and it cannot be taken away. Rights can be violated, and rights can be upheld, but they cannot be taken away. So, when we hear people say things like, I support your Second Amendment right, but I think we need common sense gun restrictions, I have to stop and think about it, because what's happening to them is they don't see the difference in those two. They don't see the difference between rights and privileges. They see rights as privileges. And this is how the narrative gets confused. This is how people on the left start to change in the way they think and the way they act, and this is how laws get changed. So we need to make people aware of the fact that our rights cannot be infringed. Our rights are not up for debate, and we will not negotiate. And thank you. And those left-wing anti-gunners will not get a seat at the negotiating table. It's not up for debate. So, now, after talking about rights and privileges, I wanted to try to talk a little bit about the two different ideologies that we have in this country. We obviously have a split right down our country. We have the left and we have the right. On the left, people tend to want rules, regulations, restrictions, laws. They like that. You have to understand something. Those people think that we can have a government-controlled utopian society. And the reason they like that idea is because it feels safe to them. They think that with rules and regulations and government control, people will be safe, organized, life will be structured in a way that they don't have to take responsibility for their own actions. You see, when you take away someone's rights and you give them a bunch of rules and a bunch of laws to follow, they lose responsibility. They don't have any more personal responsibility. It's easy to blame people for something that happened. Well, it's not my fault. That was, government should have taken care of that, or society. They like to push the burden of the burdens of society onto government, or onto their parents, or onto their professors, or their boss, or whoever. It's a lack of wanting to take personal responsibility. But they think that that is a good thing, that they think that's a good way to live. They really believe that. That's one thing that we have to understand. They believe it. They think they're the good guys, and they think that they're doing the right thing. Now, on the other side, on the right, we have people who say, get the hell out of my way. I will live my life as a free person. I'll do what I want, when I want, where I want. You won't tell me what to say. You won't tell me where to go. And you certainly won't tell me what to think. I'm a free man. And I will do what I want. And I will hold myself accountable for my failures. But I will also reap my own rewards. That's the difference. It's the difference between living in a controlled environment versus freedom. Now, when we talk about control, people think that the left wants to control the right. And what I've found is that people at the top do. They like the idea of control. But the average person, the average left-winger, the average liberal, progressive, the people that live next door, the people who we see in the grocery store, they don't necessarily want to control you as much as they want to be controlled. We get it? They like that idea. They like the structured environment. So if we can understand at least that much, we're better to either help them, which some of them can be helped, believe it or not, or defeat them. Many of them can't. Many of them cannot be helped. So that's one of the things that I like to talk about and I like to explain to people. It's the difference in thought process. That's why we don't mix. We don't understand each other. We can't understand them and they can't understand us. We do know a couple of things. This country was built on a mission statement. And that mission statement is the Constitution. That's the rules of how the government's going to be run. But along with that Constitution, there's a thing called the Bill of Rights. And that is the rights of the people. That's the people's way of saying, wait a minute, before we do anything, we want to make sure that these things are known to everybody and there will be no misunderstanding. So we appreciate that and we know that we want to live by that. The left does not necessarily want to live that way. So if we can just at least understand that much. Now, I talk about how sometimes people on the left, the anti-gun radicals, they don't trust you with guns because they wouldn't trust themselves with guns. And I have a friend who's, she tends to be over there on the left, and she tends to be anti-gun. And I'm talking to her, and she says, Dan, I was in the bank, and there was this guy in front of me in line, and he had a gun on him. And I said, well, yeah, so? I guess it was a security officer, somebody who was off duty, who was probably cashing his paycheck. And she said, well, I said, so what? She said, well, don't you think that's a little, a little weird, a little crazy? I said, crazy? Why? What do you mean, crazy? She said, well, don't you think that's a little dangerous? Dangerous? What are you talking about? She couldn't grasp the fact that this guy had a gun. And I said, why? I said, what is your problem? This guy's standing in front of you in line, he's got a gun on his hip, in a holster, what's the problem? She said, Dan, I can't believe you don't understand this. I could have easily taken that gun and started shooting people.
Yeah, good luck with that.
What was she thinking? She had to think that in her own brain. She had to imagine herself taking someone's gun and shooting people. Who should we be afraid of?
The one not carrying.
Exactly. So I talk a lot about that stuff, and I also talk about, how they use the terms, the terminology that the anti-gunners will use. Things like gun violence and assault weapon and Wild West. And all these terms that are designed to scare people. And I'd like to take the term gun violence because what they try to do is they try to take those two words and make them synonymous. They try to make guns and violence be one and the same. And I'll tell you, my gun has never been violent. And I don't think it ever could. I know it never could. There is, however, because there's no such thing as gun violence. It just does not exist. But there is a thing called human violence. And if we were to focus on human violence, we would find some interesting things. Because that spotlight would shine on failed liberal policies. If you want to see gun violence, so they say, you're really talking about human violence, and you're going to find that mostly in 4 cities across this country. There are 4 cities that make up 25% of the entire country's homicides. Those cities are Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. All Democrat run and very highly gun restricted cities. So what does that tell you about how gun restrictions affect violence, human violence? I remember watching Hillary Clinton talk about the guy. Any Hillary fans? I remember Hillary Clinton talking about the toddler and the gun. You've heard this scenario, the toddler and the gun. This is where they want you to think. All across this country, all these cute little diaper bottom babies are getting a hold of their parents' guns that their parents are just irresponsibly leaving loaded, laying around the house, right? Well, the numbers could not be smaller. This is just a scare tactic to pull at the heartstrings of people. The actual numbers of child-related accidental gun deaths is tiny. It's minuscule. The truth is, children are 6 times more likely to drown in their backyard swimming pool than they are from accidental firearm deaths. But that doesn't stop the anti-gun radicals from using that scenario because they want to change the narrative. They want to put fear in the hearts of people. And I talk about some of the strategies that they'll use, and 2 of the most effective and most sinister strategies that are used against good people. People like you, people like your neighbors, average people watching TV at night at their dinner table, is they use fear and hate. They'll use people's own emotions against them to win the gun debate, to implement more gun legislation. They use fear by making people scared to death of guns. This is why after a killing, you'll see the first thing they do is roll that AR-15 across the TV screen. They say, this is the problem. This is it. This is what everybody should be scared of. And people who don't know any better, people who don't critically think this stuff through, people who don't own guns, they fall for it. And the problem is those people vote. We need to educate them. We need them to understand guns aren't bad. Guns are good. The other thing that they do is they'll use hate. They want people to think that gun owners are recklessly and intentionally putting everyone in danger. So by using fear and hate, it's the best possible way to create these anti-gun warriors. And those are 2 of probably the most effective strategies that they have. I just want to touch on a couple more things. Some of the stuff that I talk about in my books, and I try to explain, I try to educate people on how the left-wing anti-gunners think. You know, you've heard people say, well, nobody needs an AR-15. What do you need an AR-15 for? And, you know, the reality is it's not the bill of needs. We don't even have to answer them. But what I find is people trying to justify their gun ownership. We don't have to justify our gun ownership. We have the right to do whatever we want. We have the right to own whatever we want. And for them to ask questions like, what do you need an AR-15 for? It's ridiculous to me, but I understand what they're going for. You see, if they can turn gun ownership into a need, if gun ownership could be measured by a metric or some justification of need, imagine what that would be like. Let's say, for instance, your gun ownership was measured by need. Who would determine that need? It would probably be some left-wing anti-gun politician. And now, can you imagine? You're in your house with your family, you're watching TV, somebody breaks into your home, attacks you, you shoot them in defense, and they die out in your front yard. Can you imagine how many lawyers would be gathered round to argue against you as to why you didn't need to use a gun? You could have done anything else. You could have used a 9-iron. You could have ran and hid in the closet. You could have retreated.
We'd have to abandon the house.
You'd have to abandon the house, exactly. Hey, and I'm from New York. My laws are terrible too. So I know exactly what you guys are going through. And you have the retreat. Exactly. So we can talk about the laws too. But the idea that they want to measure your gun ownership by a level of need tells you right there that once it was determined that gun ownership is measured by a level of need, it would be taken away. It would no longer be a right, it would be a privilege. And thank God for our founders who wrote that stuff into that Bill of Rights that made it clear that we have the right to keep and bear arms. That's it. Thank you very much, folks.
Right. Yeah, people like that, man, you know, I don't know it all. I'm a student of the Constitution. I hang out with people like Larry Pratt, Dan Wos, and all the speakers that were up here today. And we all should consider ourselves students of the Constitution. And, you know, you got to appreciate people like that. I thank Dan very much for taking the time. He's been down here a few times now to help out. You know, it's not about, you know, it's nice to sell a book. A few bucks is okay, but, you know, here's a guy that's out to help save his country. He's sharing information because that's what God put on his heart to do. Speaking about God putting things on people's heart. Funny thing happened. I share a little story with you folks. And get out. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm going to bloviate a little bit. You know, it's funny how things happen. Sometimes we try a little too hard and we get in our own way on certain things. And that's where I was last year at this time. My social life can only be described as a train wreck. It was awful. I couldn't stand myself. I really couldn't. I had about given up. I said, I'm going to fill my life with anything that I could, just to take my mind off my problems and, you know, be a good friend to my friends, be a good dad to my kids, and stop worrying about other trivial things. And I did. I just gave up, put it in God's hands, and started marching along.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
You know, and I was right about where this gentleman's sitting over here last year.
Sure.
And one of the speakers is up here talking, and I'm working my way around the crowd. People are saying hi and shaking hands and whatnot. And I come around the corner over here, and someone, excuse me. And I turn around, and this woman, you know, biggest, most beautiful pair of green eyes that I ever seen in my life, was sitting there staring right at me, talking to me. I go, I mean, I just drew a blank. You know, you ever been there where, you know, you're just in a situation and all the background sounds start fading away to almost nothing? Well, it's kind of like that. The speakers and the crowd is all, you know, just started to fade. And I'm looking into these green eyes, and the only thing that's going on in my head is, don't be a dork. Don't say something stupid. Don't be a dork. And all of a sudden, the crowd goes crazy, snaps me out of it. They're clapping and applauding, and I guess the speaker's off the stage, and this poor woman was saying something to me, and to this day I really don't even know what she was saying because I was just mesmerized. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. And I run for the stage. I go to do my thing and introduce the next speaker. And this is where my story gets kind of sad. You know, I got through, and, you know, I got real busy. As you see, there's always something to distract me. And the day burned through. Got to the end of the day, and I finally got the last speaker off the stage, shook the last hand, I thought, and I start perusing around here like my dog Fletcher. You see him patrolling around. That was me. I was looking for this green-eyed angel that was talking to me. And I couldn't find her. She was gone. You know, she was nowhere to be found. And I said, oh, I knew it. It was too good to be true. I could go back to my original plan A, and that's just to forget about, you know, that. And, you know, things be as they are. You know, I said I want to be a good friend to my friends, and I used to post out these random invites to come on over to the house for a little Patriot campfire. And it's pretty much an open invitation. Anyone want to come and hang out, hate on the government for a while, burn some wood in my yard? They were welcome to come over. And this woman who I knew online said, "Oh, I'd love to go, but I'm kind of stuck here, and I don't think I can get a ride." And I said, "Well, where are you from?" She said, "Holyoke." I said, "Heck, that ain't too far away." And I said, "I'll come right over and pick you up." I did, and I went over and picked her up. She hopped in the car, and we got about a tenth of a mile down the road. And I said, "It's amazing, we've been on each other's friend list for a while and haven't bumped into you in an event or something at some point in time." She said, "Well, we did." She said, "We met at the Second Amendment rally." And I turned around and took a closer look in there with those green eyes. Holy mackerel, the butterflies immediately started. Oh, I was in trouble. I was in big trouble. So,
Certainly, sweetheart.
what echoes through my head, don't be a dork, don't say something stupid. That all came back, one thing led to another. We had a nice time at the campfire and the next campfire, and we had dinner one night together, and we were just somewhere hanging around all the time, talking to each other all the time, and damn, my foolish heart started falling in love. Oh man, those butterflies, I still got those butterflies. And I tell you got to let go sometimes, and that's what I did. I let go, and one of the greatest things came back to me when I did. When you put those things in God's hands, little miracles do happen. Well, like I said, one thing led to another, and I just could not get enough of this girl. I wanted to be around her all the time. I loved talking to her on the phone, and I wasn't enough. I was in love big time. I was in hot pursuit. Praise the Lord is right. One thing led to another again, and before you know it, I'm on the phone with one of my friends, Bob, Pastor Bob Card, and I asked him, I said, I got this funny feeling about this girl. And I said, I might need your services. And I asked him if he might be willing to perform a wedding ceremony. And he said, yeah, what were you thinking? And I'm judging by the look on the poor guy's face, I think he was expecting me to say, summer, maybe fall or something. And I said, Friday? And he looks back and he says, well, oddly enough, Friday is open. And I said, well, how about the Cross and Berry? He says, I know where that is. And I said, we'll see you there at 5 o'clock. And he was. And so was Miss, Miss Cynthia Palmer at the time. But her name today is Cynthia Kopass. I didn't say I was going to say all that either, but I am. So good things do happen at Second Amendment rallies. It got nothing to do with guns. And I say do what you do with love in your heart. I bet you didn't think I meant that. But here she is. I couldn't be happier, and together we are going to continue the fight. All right? She has in her heart a lot of the same things that I do, and we took that love that we have for each other and the love for our country, and we took it to the next level. I mean, we could have gone wherever, the Grand Canyon, or almost anywhere we wanted to do some honeymooning, but we decided to do a little patriot honeymoon.
That's right.
And at the time,
Where was that?
that was in Las Vegas. I didn't play